Most renewals aren't lost because value wasn't delivered. They're lost because the wrong person acknowledged it. One thing I've learned is that no matter the vertical, the software, the client size, no client talks about you as much as you think they do, especially when things are going well. In the last video, we started unpacking the second link in the value chain, delivering the value. We covered the customer goal, what your customer is trying to achieve, and whether it's tied to a real business outcome. But setting the right goal is only half of it. Today, we're covering the second component of delivering the value, stakeholder confirmation, because value is not reached until the right person agrees that it is. If a team gets a desired outcome confirmed at the start of a relationship by the buyer or decision maker, they're one step ahead of my last video. Most often, there's then a natural handoff to their day-to-day contacts who confirm the value as the work progresses. And that's a mistake, because the person who confirms the goal at the start is not that same person that your CSM is talking to every week. And if that senior stakeholder isn't in the room when value gets delivered, they didn't experience it, which means renewal comes and they're suddenly back in the room and your team is having to start from scratch. It gets even more complicated than that. I've had several situations where the initial goal defined with that senior stakeholder is no longer relevant to them in a quarter or two. Priorities shift, org structures change, new leadership comes in, and that pace of change is only accelerating over the past few years. So if you don't have contact with that right person, you won't know until it's too late. And the goal you've been working towards for months carries no weight in the renewal conversation. In fact, a customer of mine has a new stakeholder added to their largest account, and they don't care about any of the goals initially worked on. Short-term revenue doesn't matter to them as much as competitive advantage. And my customer found that out after their last business review. Here's another example of how this looks in practice. I work with a client that sells into senior living operators, large holding companies that own multiple brands, and each of those brands have communities underneath. So the holding company is the buyer. They set the goal, they control the budget, they care about revenue growth across their portfolio. But to get the product working, you have to go down to the brand level and then further down to individual communities. And at that level, the conversations become about day-to-day operations, technical glitches, activities, details that have nothing to do with what the corporate buyer actually wanted. And what's the result? Long onboarding times, slow adoption, individual little communities where impact is hard to measure, and almost no expansion, despite that being my client's entire growth model. The senior buyer confirmed the goal at the start, but nobody brought him back in when it mattered. We changed the approach, obviously. Now, when the holding company signs, we set explicit expectations with that senior buyer. Hey, you're going to be brought in if things start moving in a different direction at the brand or community level, or you'll be brought back in when we have the first results to review together. And at that point, we're going to talk about the expansion plan for more brands and more communities. That's not just good proactive relationship management, it's getting implicit agreement on a future conversation. And it makes expansion a logical next step instead of a cold ask. In tandem, we've gotten way more prescriptive about what types of communities should be the first ones onboarded so that we increase our ability to drive results. Now, here's what stakeholder confirmation looks like when it goes really right. You might remember Signals. It was a Series A company that I mentioned in the last episode. We'd worked really hard to get the promise right, clarity on exactly what the platform could deliver, and keeping a big innovation idea as a stretch goal rather than the core promise. In our work with the skincare brand, that stretch goal started to come to life. We identified an active ingredient called hyaluronic acid that was driving the benefit most customers were looking for, hydration, backed by a ton of scientific research. The brand was about to launch a product that already contained it. Lots did in skincare. But we advised them to make that ingredient the centerpiece of the label and the marketing. That SKU went on to become the #1 seller at Sephora for multiple weeks. And here's what made the difference. Instead of letting that finding and that win sit with the associate brand manager we worked with every day, we went directly to the SVP and global general manager. That's the highest role at that brand. We made sure she knew exactly where that finding originated with the associate manager on the call too, and we helped her build slides that she took to her board meeting. That board meeting unlocked an introduction to the head of global innovation at the corporate level for myself and my company. The value was real either way, but because the right person confirmed it and was equipped to tell the story internally, it compounded in a way that never would have otherwise. After we got introduced to the global head of innovation, that's how we grew the contract from 200K to 1.8 million. And that's what stakeholder confirmation does. It protects the renewal. And it creates the conditions for expansion that your team would have a really tough time manufacturing on their own. Here's a quick test for you. For your top 5 accounts, who confirmed the goal at the start of the relationship? When value gets or was delivered, did that person actively confirm the value in front of you? If the answer to that last question is no, you're still leaving renewal and expansion to chance. And one thing worth noting, your CSM may not always be able to reach those senior levels on their own. You might need an additional person in your firm whose job it is to work with those stakeholders directly. And that's not a failure. It's a structural decision that's going to protect your most important accounts. In fact, especially if you have enterprise level clients, they're so fragmented and there's so many layers, you absolutely will need multiple people to hold relationships in different places. I'm Erin Stavi, and I'm the founder of Lakeshore Success. I'll see you on the next one, which is our final part of the second part of the value chain. See ya.